It is Monday, the 18th of December 2023. Wearing a normal t-shirt today, not a truther t-shirt, shock, horror. It's a regular communal garden t-shirt. Nothing special there. Just a few days away from the winter solstice in what we refer to as the Northern Hemisphere. And with every passing year, I'm finding myself as I progress through this journey of life, less and less connected to the tradition and ritual and ceremony of what we refer to as Christmas, and just more connected to the idea of the winter solstice, the so-called shortest day, where the scales start to tip the other way. So from the 25th of December onwards, the days in this part of the world start to get slowly longer, a few minutes each day, slowly lighter as we head towards spring, and then the life-giving force of nature gives way to summer, and we move all the way to the apex of the summer solstice. So I'm finding a real connectedness with nature and the cycles of time and the seasons, which I think is representative of my own journey progressing, my own spiritual journey. I'm sure many people out there can relate to that as well. Really, Christmas, all the dressings and all the pomp and pageantry and stuff just really means less and less to me with every passing year. I mean, I enjoy a bit of downtime. It's good that things are a bit different and you get some time to meet up with family and, just take a bit of a backseat from your regular working schedule. That side of things is pretty positive. But, the present buying, the materialism, the greed and the gluttony with all the food and the drink and stuff just doesn't mean anything to me anymore. I'm even starting to sell off parts of my record collection, which I never thought I would. I've got a whole load of vinyl records from back in the day, from my DJing past, and I'm starting to sell those on discogs.com and stuck a few of them on eBay, and I'm starting to do some record fairs as well, where I just pitch up on a Saturday and flog a whole load of vinyl. I never thought I would get rid of my records. I always thought I had too much of an attachment to them, but I'm finding again that as time goes on, my priorities in life are just changing, and things that used to mean a lot to me don't anymore. So a lot of the vinyl is going, it clears out a lot of space, it brings in a bit of money, so it's a win-win really. So I'm going to be doing a show in a couple of days with Andy Thomas, who is the curator of the Glastonbury Symposium. Great event, takes place over the last weekend in July every year in Glastonbury, England. Andy's been running that for many, many years. He's also a very prolific researcher in his own right, and he put out a book a few years ago just titled Christmas: A Short History from Solstice to Santa. Great little book, and I'll be having a chat with Andy about the real meaning and origin of Christmas. What is this strange festival that so many of us partake in every year? Most of us without giving any thought as to why we do things like have Christmas trees, give gifts, what all the symbolism pertains to. So we'll be looking at the pagan origins of Christmas, its connectedness to the winter solstice, and many other themes and traditions from around the world. That'll be an interesting show. I did a similar one a few years ago with Ryan Gable of The Secret Teachings, but I'll be interested to get Andy's take on that whole thing. The main message, the main theme of this video then, was inspired by a recent Good Vibrations podcast that I recorded with Ant and Kev, have to be careful not to call them Ant and Dec, of the Drake Michigan podcast. So we got into some real deep subjects. And specifically, one of the biggest questions that a human soul or a human being can ask in these lifetimes. So we can get into the so-called real world detail of all the conspiracies and all the stuff that's going on, all the shenanigans, all the machinations of the so-called elites and the control system and stuff. But then you go a level deeper and you say, okay, all this stuff is happening in this reality, but what actually is this reality? What is the true nature of it? So for many years, I've mentioned this before on podcasts, I went through a period in the early 90s where I believed that I was a Christian, a born-again Christian. That's how I identified. And I gave all that up in about 1994 and embarked on a long period of atheism. I left the church experience with a sort of bitter taste in my mouth from some of the stuff that I'd seen, and it didn't sit well with me. So it caused me to become an atheist, didn't believe in anything. But then, as again my spiritual journey started to progress and open up, I absolutely accepted that of course there is a creative force, a most high, that many would call God, which created this reality in which we find ourselves. And I came to comprehend or accept that we ourselves are individuated aspects of consciousness. So we're individual units of that divine source, expressing itself in all these infinite ways. But more recently, I've become quite disturbed by some of the stuff that I've been seeing, experiencing, hearing. Specifically, the amount of suffering that is going on in the world. And I've mentioned this again in previous videos. So many people that I know, actually everyone, every individual that I know, every family that I know is going through it right now. Everybody's going through hardships, struggles, and this didn't used to be the case, at least not on the surface. When I cast my mind back to what I would say were happier times, specifically the 1990s in my case, I don't remember people suffering to the degree that they are now. I don't remember the amount of hardships. And people will say, well, that's because the agendas have been stepped up, and that's because we're having more done to us. We're being attacked on all fronts, psychologically, mentally, physically, in terms of our health and all the rest of it. And certainly that's true. But again, it doesn't go all the way to explaining why so many good people, most of the people I associate with, are truth seekers, critical thinkers, and those who want to make the world a better place. They're working on themselves, doing that self-work, and they're trying to play that out in society as well by doing the right thing, what they know to be right. So these people don't deserve to be suffering to the degree that they are. Then there are some inexplicable phenomena, such as, for example, what's referred to as the Mandela Effect. So I know I'm a bit late to the party here, and I know this idea has been around for many, many years now, but it is one which fascinates me, and as far as I'm concerned, is one which has validity. There are many, many examples of this phenomenon. I personally think it's badly named because it refers to the large number of people who supposedly remember hearing that Nelson Mandela died in jail in Robben Island, Cape Town. I don't remember that at all. I remember him being released and going on to become president of South Africa. So I think this phenomenon needs a more accurate name, but in terms of what it professes, it's absolutely spot on because things aren't the same as we remember them. I mean, Dolly's braces in Moonraker are the classic one. It's the classic one for me, but everyone will have their individual examples of this. So what the hell is that all about? It feels as if we've slipped into a different version of reality to the one that used to be there. Could this explain why there's so much suffering and hardship? Because it's literally not the same world that so many of us remember. Everything feels different to me. It doesn't feel the way it did as I was growing up in the 70s, 80s, going into the 90s. The world just feels like a different place, a different reality. I can sense it instinctively. Something has changed. So this is what I discussed with the lads on the Drake Michigan podcast. And we were contemplating whether we have slipped into some sort of simulated reality. So this is simulation theory. Again, I know I'm quite late to the party here. Many people have been on board with this idea for some years. I guess you have to come to it in your own time, in your own way. But I'm there now. And I'm seriously asking whether this reality is a bastardized overlay of what was there previously. So this is not original creation. It's somehow been hijacked, manipulated, distorted, and steered off in a different direction. This raises all kinds of additional questions. The first one being, what kind of entity or force would be capable of doing something like that? I know this is an idea that was expressed by the group known as the Archons. They had this idea of the demiurge, which was this lesser being than the original creator God that had somehow gained the power to create a different version of reality. The other really big question that this raises for me is, if there is a loving, benevolent creator God, the Most High, how can that force have allowed this bastardization of its beautiful original creation to have occurred? If this being represents good and love, as we like to think of it as doing, why would it have allowed its creation to have been steered off in this way? People will say, well, it's free will. Collectively, humanity has allowed itself to be steered off in this direction because we didn't put up enough of a fight, and we chose to adopt certain behaviours, certain thought patterns, certain levels of consciousness that have allowed this reality to take force. I don't entirely accept that. I do accept that free will is here in creation, and we have concepts such as consent. And for many years, I was of the view that in the spirit world, before we incarnated into these bodies, into these lives, on a soul level, we made the free will choice to come in at the point in the timeline when we did, and to go through the experiences that we now are. So I've now got questions about that. I've now got questions about whether somehow we've been forced or tricked into this kind of reality, because I just find it so difficult to accept that so many souls would have chosen to come here and suffer hardship in so many ways. And I get that our souls need to undergo certain experiences in order to grow and evolve, and we have to go through some shit in order to transcend it and, advance. I get all of that. I've been familiar with those ideas for many years. I'm now asking whether this world is the same one that many of us were born into some decades ago. So yes, I'm on board, I guess you could say, with this idea of simulation theory. It's a subject that I do want to explore much deeper. And I would welcome comments and feedback from anyone watching this as to what they think about this subject. So if you feel to drop me an email, we've got the Christmas New Year period coming up. I'm going to be taking a bit of a back seat from a lot of my work, so I'm going to have some time to look at some of these emails. So if you want to drop me an email to markdevlin2022@protonmail.com, that address will be in the notes below. Feel free to get in touch and share your thoughts, or you can drop them in the comment section below this video and I'll take a look. What questions can be any bigger than that? What are we doing here? What is this place? I think we all owe it to ourselves to at least give some thought and contemplation to this, because it's got some very serious ramifications potentially as to where we go from here when these lives are up. So yeah, there's some discussion for the Christmas meal table, eh? Share that one with your friends and family and get even more ostracized than you probably were before. So those are my thoughts, and clearly this is a big subject which could run for a very long time. We'll see where it goes. Excuse me. This may be the last video that I do in 2023. We'll see how it goes. If I get some time and if I've got some appropriate things to say, I might drop another one before the end of this year, or this nominal year at least. So on the assumption that this is going to be the last video of the year, I've just got a few items that I wanted to mention, a bit of housekeeping, a few announcements. So in terms of recent shows that I've done, there's the aforementioned Good Vibrations podcast with Kev and Ant of Drake, Michigan, where we got into a lot of this stuff. We also got into the issues of stress, anxiety, building on this theme of so many people suffering and just finding it difficult to navigate these times. And in the second part of that conversation, so I split it into two, we got into a few solutions and a few coping mechanisms, which I really hope will be of value to a lot of people out there. I also had a chat recently with Dom and Chris of Sheep Farm Studios. They're doing their thing, new episodes every Saturday. Love their shows, love the northern humour. Good to have a laugh. isn't it, about the absurdity and the ridiculous nature of this world. And of course, the Sheep Farm boys always do that. We got into a lot of subjects over the course of 2 hours plus. That show is on my platforms. It's also on Sheep Farm. And I'm going to be regrouping with the Sheep Farm lads, Dom and Chris, and also the guys from Rise Above, who do another great show. Rise Above live stream every Friday on YouTube. So Lance and Andy PG will be joining myself and the Sheep Farm boys for a roundup of Clown World 2023. We'll be recording that in the early days of January, so watch out for that early in the, so-called new year, where we'll just be taking an informed look and an irreverent look at, again, the absurd nature of what we've all had to endure over the past 12 months. Somehow we've made it. Not always entirely sure how, but here we are. So watch out for that show coming soon. I mentioned the Good Vibrations episode with Andy Thomas on the origins of Christmas, so that'll be out this side of Christmas. I'm going to be doing a Good Vibrations with Darren Williams, very interesting guy from Liverpool, profound researcher. He goes to some very unexpected areas. And also Christopher Knowles, who is pretty much the same thing. He's an incredible researcher who dredges up some amazing, mind-blowing information. I'm in awe of the show that he did with Greg Carlwood quite a few years ago on the Higher Side Chats, where he was drawing links between Jeff Buckley, the musician, who drowned in some very mysterious circumstances in the mid-90s, and Liz Fraser, who was the singer with the indie group the Cocteau Twins out of Scotland. So Chris Knowles drew together an insane amount of threads and highlighted all the synchro-mysticism linking those two, and the idea of mermaids, the song of the siren, sacrifice by water, and all these other occult esoteric ideas. That show, if you can dig it out, with Greg Carlwood, I think it was 2017, is well worth a listen if you want your mind blown to about 1,000 different pieces. So I'll be doing this show with Darren Williams and Chris Knowles early in January. We're going to be talking about P. Diddy, or whatever the hell he's calling himself this week, Sean Combs, proprietor of Bad Boy Records, big name on the hip-hop scene in the 90s and beyond, one of the richest men in hip-hop, and there'll be a reason for that, because he's a straight demon who sold his soul a long time ago. There's lots to know about him, and there's lots of revelations which have come out recently linking him to some very unsavoury practices. So we'll be getting into the true nature of P. Diddley, whatever the hell he's calling himself, Puff Daddy, in that show. And I'm going to be drawing on my background as a DJ, a club and radio DJ in the 90s, who played a lot of the stuff on his label. So back in the 90s, I was playing stuff by the Notorious B.I.G. and the Lox and Faith Evans and G-Dep and all these other groups and artists, 112, Total, that he had on that label. And back then, I knew no better. I was just playing my role as a DJ, doing what DJs were required to do. But I was very active in that scene. I played club gigs all over the UK, and I actually got to play in New York a few times as well. I DJ'd in a legendary club called Nell's, which was better known for its live music, but they had some club nights as well. I did a club called 13 a couple of times as well. And most notably for me, I was in attendance at the Tunnel, which was an absolutely legendary night in hip-hop circles in the 90s and early noughties. This was on Sunday nights. It was Funkmaster Flex on the decks, Big Cap, and Cypher Sounds used to play there as well. And all the big rappers, all the celebrities on the hip-hop scene, the record label executives, used to go and hang out at the Tunnel. That was the place to be. It was like the Studio 54 or the Paradise Garage of the hip-hop world. So I consider myself privileged enough to have been a part of the Tunnel experience. It was quite unnerving at times because very, very often in a club that held up to 2,000 people, I would be the only Caucasian individual in the building. But it didn't really faze me because I was just so into the culture, so into the music that I just wanted to blend in and be a part of things. And I'm glad that I did. It's not really something that I would do today. I wouldn't go to a place like that. But back then, it meant a lot to me. I remember one time I hung around until 5 o'clock in the morning when the club closed to get an interview with Funkmaster Flex, which I put out on my radio show at the time. So for me, these were incredible times. I had an absolute blast in the 90s, and I loved all that hip-hop output. What passes for so-called rap, hip-hop and urban music today bears no resemblance whatsoever to how it did in those times. And P. Diddley has moved with the times. He's become an executive, and he's got involved in, it would seem, quite a number of agendas which extremely compromised individuals do. You cannot be as rich, as successful, as prolific as P. Diddley without being involved in some stuff. So that show will be getting into all of that. And also Darren and myself will be inviting Chris Knowles to bring to the table whatever research he's got on the occult, esoteric side of popular culture and entertainment. I'm sure he's going to have something interesting to present to us. I'll be doing a separate show with Lou Collins here in the UK, also talking about P. Diddley and some of the stuff that he's into. So watch out for that one as well. That'll be a very sort of UK-centric, British-centric show. That's early in January as well. Got a show coming up in a few days with my very good friend Amanda McLeod in Australia. So she was a big part of my recent Australian tour. She organised the Brisbane leg of that. And in a few days we'll be linking up to do a show recapping on that Australia tour and just giving my reflections on how it all went down. On the whole, it was an amazing experience. It was one that I'm very glad that I did. I think it was very worthwhile, and I think it reached a lot of people. It got information to a lot of people who had not previously seen it. There were a few jaws to the floor and a few gasps from the audience, which lets me know that people are finding some value and are really learning something from the information that I present. So I'll be talking about that with Amanda, and also the new novel, which I've mentioned a couple of times, but I'm going to mention it again. The Gift and the Curse. This is the follow-up to The Cause and the Cure. So that's just been published. It's set in 2001. It has many of the characters from the earlier story finding themselves embroiled in the aftermath to 9/11. So I'll be talking with Amanda about some of the themes in that book, because it's layered, it's coded, it's allegorical and symbolic in places, there's some anagrams. Basically, it's got hidden layers that you can strip away and have a lot of fun decoding. I want to mention my music shows. So every week I do this show called The Sound of Now. It's 2 hours of soulful, uplifting house music, which is what I get into these days as a DJ. So there's some gospel house in there. I play a lot of gospel house. I don't identify as a Christian, but I find gospel house music to be incredibly uplifting. It just makes my soul soar to the sky. So I include a lot of that. I include a lot of disco house, because a lot of disco music from the 70s was actually very good in quality. You know, it's proper orchestras, proper bands, real music. It gets frowned upon because of the sort of tacky kitsch nature of disco towards the end of its main lifespan. But there was a lot of great music around, and it gets revived in a house music fashion by a lot of great producers. You know, Dave Lee, Dr. Packer, Mike Gray, a lot of people like that. So every week I do this show called The Sound of Now, which I post to my Mixcloud. I've got a Christmas sort of gospel house selection coming up this weekend. Then for the next 2 shows that I'll be doing, it's a roundup of the big tunes of 2023 that I've most enjoyed playing on that show. So it's on Mixcloud. There's options to download it as well. Watch out for that on my Mixcloud, and you can go to my main hub website, djmarkdevlin.com, to get the links through to it. On New Year's Eve, or let's just say 31st of December, I will be doing another instalment of the show that I call Studio 105, named of course after that famous New York discotheque, Studio 54. This one used to air on a radio station called First FM, 105 FM in Oxford, till I got kicked off the airwaves. So I still call it Studio 105. That will be going out on my Mixcloud as well from 9 p.m. on 31st of December. And this time round, it's subtitled The Spirit of 1978. So it's big, soulful disco tunes from that particular year, taking it back 45 years. Always have a lot of fun doing that one. You know, we've got to have coping mechanisms. I mentioned this earlier. And when you wallow in all this heavy, dense sort of conspiracy material for too long, you can really start to feel it weighing on your soul. It can really drag you down. So you've got to have ways of escaping from that. People have different methods. You know, I do enjoy going for walks and stuff like that, you know, healthy stuff. But I also enjoy just escaping into music. And the Soulful House is the only stuff that I can really stand to listen to anymore, because everything else has just become so bland or so toxified. And I enjoy going back to 70s disco music as well for the reasons that I just outlined. So doing these shows is very helpful for me, and it helps me keep going. So I just escape into music every week, jump on the decks, relive my past as a DJ, and it just helps me to be able to continue doing all the other stuff that I do. So don't knock it, hey. Live events. So I've finished my live talk events for 2023. I just want to give a big shout to Karen at Uprise and Shine for a great event at the start of December in London, deepest, darkest London, Rotherhithe. Then on the Sunday of that weekend, I had a great time at the Barnyard Comedy Club close to Nuneaton. Big shout to Sam and everyone else involved in that. The following weekend, I was in Lincolnshire for a double bill. So big thanks to Stuart for organising the Cleethorpes talk and to Sarah for Mablethorpe. And this weekend just gone, I was really happy to have been a part of the Questioning History London event. So this was a walk, a tour around interesting parts of London, including Benjamin Franklin's old house, very close to the banks of the Thames, and then a lecture, an all-day lecture this Saturday just gone by Gloria Moss on a very fascinating subject. So that's it for the events this year. I'm going to resume in January on Tuesday the 9th in Buxton in the Peak District. So that's my first event of 2024. Then on Saturday the 13th of January, I'm going to be in Norwich in the evening. And on Saturday 27th of January, back to Newcastle for Truth Seekers Northeast, where I'll be presenting my Dark Occult Aspects of Queen presentation. I think that's an afternoon one. So keep an eye on djmarkdevlin.com/events for those. There's some summer festivals starting to come in. Going to be a part of the Hope Freedom Music Festival in July next year. Also Uprise and Shine. I've got a shindig going on in remotest Wales, somewhere out near Snowdonia. So I'm happy to be a part of that one, and lots of other summer events. Just looking forward to the spring and the summer coming back, because I really do come alive in those months. For me, getting through the winter is a survival exercise. I don't thrive in the winter. So I'm happy that the scales are about to tip in just a few days' time. Other than that, I'm currently working on an audiobook version of The Gift and the Curse, which will be available on Amazon's audible.com, but you'll also be able to get direct download links from me when that's finished. It is taking an unfeasible amount of time, as anyone who's ever narrated and produced an audiobook will tell you. It's not so much the narration, even though that takes bloody ages in itself. It's the production afterwards, the editing, taking out all the pops and the crackles and the double takes and getting the spacing correct and getting the leveling correct and all of that. But I'm aiming for January, hopefully early January, certainly by mid-January, to get the audiobook version out. So in the meantime, you've got the printed and the Kindle, but I'm very keen to get that audiobook finished. I've got a new shop section on my website, djmarkdevlin.com. Big shout out to Eric for putting that together. And that's a one-stop shop where you can get my books, the t-shirt range that I've got available, and also the MD Archives offer. So that's where I fill up one of these, a Seagate 1 terabyte external hard drive with my entire archives going back the best part of 15 years. So it's every interview that I've ever done in video and audio form. There's over 400 of those. There's every episode of Good Vibrations, every episode of the Sound of Freedom Conscious Music podcast, the audio books that I've done so far, the soundtracks to my books, the video updates that I did throughout the COVID debacle and beyond. That's all there on these archives. So details of that in the shop section on the website. That's pretty much all that I wanted to get across this time, so feel free to get in touch with any thoughts on the main theme of this video. I may do another one, as I say, before the end of 2023, but if I don't, happy Christmas to those who celebrate, and a peaceful New Year, even though it's not the real New Year, but you know what I mean. And I'll catch you on the other side whenever that may be. Thanks for all the support through 2023, to everyone that's turned up to my events, to everyone that's listened to the shows, to everyone that supported me and read the books. It's gratefully appreciated very much. Catch you soon. Cheers for now.